So in our previous demo, we took a look at putting together this HTML file. We basically said that this structure that you're seeing here is essentially a hierarchy. And when you put together this hierarchy, you're basically looking at a default display. So in HTML, we basically have this display. This is the default display for the navigation, default display for unordered list, and the default display for the paragraph, for the link, and so on. So if we ever wanted to change certain aspects of the display, meaning we wanted to change the display color, the size, the location, all of these things are handled by cascading style sheets or CSS. So for the remainder of this demo, what I want to do is show you that, I'll show you how to apply CSS to your HTML file. So I just want you to see that we're currently running our server. It is listening on port 5000. So right now I can see my page.html on my local host and 5000. So what we have so far is my HTML. There are generally three places that we can put styles for our page. Only one of these are really recommended because if you think about it, a typical website that you put together may have several pages. So really, I want to link all of the pages to one style so that the same style can be applied to all pages. So this allows us to have some consistency throughout the pages. It helps with learnability and likability and all of those things. But let me start with the first few, the first two, which are not recommended. The first way to put a style into our web page is we just use the style tag. A style tag typically goes into the head tag, and a style tag just means within this this opening and closing style tag, we have listed all of the styles that we want to apply. Syntax for CSS is we have a bunch of property and value pairs. So it turns out that every tag, every element that we produce on HTML has some attributes that go along with it. So as an example, if I chose the body, now this is my selector. This is one way that we can select what tag to apply this style to. If I apply this to the body tag, I'm referring to this thing right here. So within everything within this body tag is going to have all the style that's written in between. So let's say I just choose a really simple style, color and red. Right? If I apply this color in red, this is going to apply to the body. So basically anything that can be overwritten in the body is going to be overwritten by the color red, by the property color and the value red. So if you take a look at the result of this, you're going to see that the page is, anything that can change the default to red, we've basically changed it to red. Okay, so this is the first way that you can apply a style. The second way that you can apply style is, let's say I don't want everything to be red. I want, a particular tag to be red. So I can apply these styles to specific tags as well. So for example, if I go to, let's say this paragraph here, and I've actually added some IDs and classes, which I'm going to show you in 1 second. But let's say we have this paragraph. I can have a style attribute, and within this style attribute, I can identify some styles as well. So for example, if I do style, and then in this case, I can do something like background color. Let's make it yellow. It's not going to be the best look, but hopefully you can see what's going on. If I do style and then background color is yellow, I could give a semicolon there. Now, the different pairs are separated by semicolons. So if I go back up here and take a look at what we've done, I basically have this, probably not the best example. I basically applied the background color yellow to this whole paragraph. Now, this paragraph runs from here all the way down to here. So this basically includes the hello world, as well as the link to the SFU website, as well as this picture that I've included. Okay, so I hope you're starting to get the idea of how this works. I should also mention that paragraph in itself is what's called a block level element. So it creates vertical space on our page. Now, what that means is that when I create a paragraph, I'm basically creating the box that is created goes all the way around and all the way to the sides of my browser. Okay, now let me just show you very quickly that instead of applying this style here, what if I apply this style to this link? Okay, so what if I instead put a link here as background color, yellow? Okay, so you can see the difference that it makes. If I do a refresh here, you see that the yellow only applies to this link. And in fact, it doesn't go all the way to the other side of the browser. So the A tag, the anchor tag, is what we call a inline level tag because it creates horizontal space on our browser. Okay, so these are the two types of tags that we have to keep track of. And you should note that every time we create a tag, there, at least in the body part of the web page, we're basically creating some kind of rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to show you that rectangle later on in this demo, but we should keep that in mind. And this is basically the ways that we're going to apply the styles to individual tags. Now, I did say at the very beginning here that these two methods are not recommended, only because they are applied to a single page or even to a single element. Now, generally to keep things organized a little bit, we want to be a little bit more broad with the way that we represent our styles. So I'm just going to take these away for now. And I'm going to talk about other ways that we can apply a style. The third way that we can apply a style, or a third location that we can specify where the style is with an external style. So an external style, we typically use the link tag, and we're given a relationship, or we have to specify a relationship, and this is a style sheet, and we have to give the location of the style. Now, you see here that I have mypage.html. I have to give a relative location to where the style sheet is. So in the public folder, I'm going to apply a file called style.css. Now, I haven't created this file yet, but that's the link that I want to create. And I'm going to make the corresponding file. Whoops, I'm sorry, it's not public. It's called style sheets. Style sheets. So style sheets, and then /style. I'm going to go into style sheets, and I'm going to create that file called style.css. Okay, now here is where I can apply the style to my page. So let's go through the same example as we did before. If I wanted to change some aspect of my page, so I'm just gonna revert back to what I had before. If I wanted to apply the red color to my body, I can do the same thing. I can say body. Everything in here applies to the body, and I can make it color red. Okay, so now how do I get a specific part of the page? And this is where IDs and classes come in. So earlier I mentioned that I did add some IDs and classes. So a class is basically a location or an element that I'm going to give some definition to, some style definition to. So you see this list tag as well as this paragraph tag. Both of them I called red, class red, and ironically, I'm not going to make things red. So I'm just going to call it the class red, and in here I'm going to give it some style. All right, so let's again do the background color, and let's call it yellow. Okay, let's do it yellow. This is terrible naming, but we'll just stick with what we have here. So whatever is class red, I'm basically giving the background of yellow, background color of yellow. So for now, let's see what's happened. Now I've applied two styles. Everything in the body is red, and those two classes you see are yellow. Okay, so this hello world, all the way down to the image, it has a background of yellow. So another way that we can specify a particular part of our page is to use an ID. The difference between a class and an ID is ID, whatever we call the ID, can appear only once on a page. So whereas we can have several elements, several tags that are class red, I can only have one ID, which is called navigate1, or yeah, navigate1. So to indicate an ID, I use this pound symbol. And so pound and navigate1 is indicating that I'm looking for an ID called navigate1. Oh, by the way, if it's a class, then we use a dot. All right, so let's say navigate1, I want to, I don't know, do a font size. That is 2EM. Okay, so the 2EM here is twice the measurement of what it should be. So as the default, as what the default is, I want to make the second, I want to make it twice as big as that. Okay, so it was small and now it's twice the size. Okay. And we can do a lot of different things. We can add IDs to kind of identify what part of the page we want to grab, and we can apply multiple styles to whatever we're grabbing. So, for example, I can apply the font size to be 2EM. I can also make the font family to be, I don't know, let's say cursive. Okay, and you can see the difference that is the result here. Okay, so nav1 here is going to be a different font than the default font that we're given for that web page. Okay, so so let me just get rid of this for now. It's kind of a little bit annoying. I'm going to comment this out, and this is the way that we comment the CSS out, and you can see that we're reverting back to what we have here. Let's do another example. So if I wanted to grab an image, so every image is going to look like the following. So every image on my page, I want it to have a border that is 1 pixel, solid, and black. All right, so let me save this and take a look at what this looks like. So this is the image here. So the way that this image is displayed by default is just it gets plopped onto the page at its default size. So right now I've put a border around it just to get an idea of where the endpoints of this image is. And let's say that I want to make this image a little bit smaller. So let's make the width 200 pixels. Okay, so the width being 200 pixels, I've actually made that image a little bit smaller. And let's say that I want to make the border radius, let's say 20%, let's say 30%. Okay, so you can have an idea what these things are doing. In the slides, I provide a lot of examples. You can take a look at those examples and what they do, and just kind of showing you that we can apply several properties to the same tag that we're grabbing. So that's what it looks like. You see the border radius is 30% here, and this is basically what we have for our web page. So other things that we can do in terms of grabbing the elements that are on our HTML page is we can grab attributes as well. So there's a section that I've put on the slides that are talking about attribute selectors. So how we grab attribute selectors is we can use the following notation. So if I have an HTML file, and let's say we have, let's take a look here. I have, I'm trying to find a good one here, a good example here. Okay, so let's say I want to do type and text. Okay, so there is an attribute called type, and the value is text. So if I wanted to grab everything of the type, the attribute type that has text, then I can do something of the following. So I can use these square brackets, and I can say every time there's an element that has type equal to text, then I'm going to apply this style. So let's just say, what should we do here? Let's just do another border. So border, and let's make it thicker this time, 4 pixels, and solid, and green. Okay, so this is just short notation to specify a border. So what type of a border is it, what color is it, and how thick it is. You know, I'll talk about the borders in 1 second. But let's say we do that, and you can see that the thing that is type text is given that border. Okay, so there's 4 pixels. It's a solid green border that's going around that element that we just took. Okay, so so there are, again, other ways that we can select you know, different elements. We can select siblings, we can select ancestors and descendants, and so on, right? So I'll have you take a look at those slides and take a look at all the different representations that we can select things based on the attributes. All right, so so there are so there are other pseudo classes and pseudo selectors that pseudo element selectors that we can apply as well. So I'll give you one quick example of that. On our HTML page, there was a anchor tag, and I've made the ID SFU link. Okay, so for the SFU link, I'm going to first grab this this selector. Okay, so if I do SFU link, and it is a ID, so the ID SFU link, I want to apply the following style. I want to make the background color to be blue. Now, not only that, I want the background color to be blue only when I'm doing the hovering. Okay, so the colon is stands for pseudo class, and one of the selections here is called hover. So when I hover over this element that is called SFU link, I want the background color to be blue. All right, so if we save this, and if I go to this link here, when I hover over it, the background is going to be blue. Okay, this is not the best look, but you know, just trying to show you the different types of styles that can be applied. Now, there are other interactions that I can set other styles for as well. And again, all of this is outlined in the slides pretty extensively. All right, so so the last thing that I want to kind of show you, or actually 2 more things I want to show you. If you ever want to see or kind of inspect what's the room that's taken up by each of these elements, we can go to inspect, and if you go to elements, you're going to see kind of all of the HTML here. If you put your mouse over each one of these parts, it'll show you kind of what part of the page this element takes up. So for example, navigation takes up all this room, and if you go into UL, and the first list item takes up this room, and so on. Right? So you notice, remember what I said before, block level elements, so LI is a block level element, by default takes up vertical space, right? So you see this LI element, it goes all the way from one side of the page to the other, one side of the browser to the other side. Okay, and you can see all of those as well. So CSS works on what's called the box model. So the box model has basically these 4 parts here. So the first part is the content itself. Okay, so if we're talking about the content in our example that I have here is the nav1, is the text nav1. Outside of that, there is some padding. Now, right now, I haven't added any padding to it, but if we added some padding, that means we're going to add some room between the text as well as the border. Now, I also haven't added the border, but maybe I should. So nav1 was here, and maybe I should just do a border, 1 pixel border. Okay, All right, so no, 1 pixel. Oh, border width. Okay, 1 pixel solid red. Okay, so let's just do that. Okay, so hopefully this will show up. So you see this border shows up. You see right now between the word and the border, there's actually no space, so there's no padding. Okay, the margin has to do with uh, the thing that's outside of the border. So between one element and the next element, there's actually by default no space. So we can add more space to that as well. Okay, so these are applying what's called the padding property and the margin property, and we can specify some space to fill in each of those parts. All right, so the final thing that I want to talk about here is how do we give some room to, or sorry, how do we kind of shift elements from one place to another? Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to add a few more things to my file here. In fact, I'm going to start in our paragraph. I'm going to do this hello world. I'm going to do several hello worlds just to create some vertical space on my page. Okay, so hopefully that's enough. All right, so right now I want to take a look at a property that allows me to be able to shift things around. So right now you see everything is kind of in a vertical fashion. So let's say I wanted to take this image. Okay, so I'm going to go to my style. I take my image, and I have the style associated with this image. But what I want to do is apply what's called a float property. Okay, I'm going to float it left. Okay, now I want you to see what happens to the rest of the elements that are following the image. So you see all of the elements that were originally down here gets floated up to here. So the way that we can understand how float works is that we're basically taking this element from its normal flow and we're removing it from the page, and we're kind of plopping it to the left-hand side of where it was supposed to go. So all the elements that are following that is going to kind of float around it to kind of compensate for the room. Okay, so this is floating the image to the left. All right, so there's another attribute that goes with this as well. So you see I have this form here. Okay, if I took this form and I wanted to remove every floated item and basically plop it back into its original position, then I would use a what is this called? Sorry, just had a brain freeze here. Uh, so it is called a clear property. I should have known that. So if I wanted to clear this form, then one thing that I can do is take this form and clear the left side. So basically what this means is I am going to, whenever I see a form tag, if there's anything on the left side that is floating, I want to just remove that from from the flow. So essentially, I want to take this form and put it back into its original position. So you can see what happens, and there's some floated items here, and the table that we originally had was is compensating for that floating, but the form is not. Okay. So that is one way to move things around and take elements out of its normal flow. So for now, let me comment those two out. So let me comment the image as well as this float property out. And let me go back to the original. So right now what you see is that we have this image that is somewhere within my page. So the last thing I want to talk about to be able to kind of move things around is called a position property. All right, so position, there's actually 4 types that I want to talk about. So the first one is called a static. So static just simply means that it's not moving. So static is actually by default. So right now, what you're seeing is that this item, this image is actually in a static position. Okay, so this is just the default. All right, so another type of positioning is what we call the relative position. Now, position, typically there are a bunch of attributes, a bunch of properties that go with it as well. So there's a top property, and there's also a left property. There's also a right and bottom as well, although probably the one that you're going to using the most are the top and left properties. So the top property basically says, I want to add some room to the top. So let's say add 50 pixels to the top. The left means I want to add some space to the left. And let's say I do 125 pixels to the left. So I want you to see what happens when I apply the relative position property to the image and add some room to the top and room to the left. So you see, I added 50 to the top and 125 to the left. So I basically shifted this element away from where it should be, right, using a relative position. Okay, so relative position means I don't mess with the general flow. So I imagine that this image is still there. Okay, all I do is I take it away from where it should be and then add some space to the top and to the left or whatever. Okay, so that's the relative positioning. Now, if we do an absolute positioning, I want you to see what the difference is. The absolute positioning is going to remove this image from the flow altogether, and it's going to bring it to the parent. Okay, so it's going to bring it to the parent, and it's going to give it 50 pixels to the top and 125 pixels to the left. So I want you to see what that looks like. So it removed, you see, it's like this image got removed from its original location, and its parent is actually the body, right? So with respect to the body, I've added 50 and 125 pixels. Okay, so this is how absolute works. All right, I want you to see that as I scroll, absolute is still stuck to the parent, right? It's still stuck to the body. So this image is actually scrolling along with the body, which brings me to the last one, which is called fixed. So a fixed positioning is one that, if I do a refresh on this, so this is stuck not to the parent, but to the browser. So with respect to the browser, I've added 50 on the top and 125 on the left. And now when I scroll, you notice that this image scrolls along with me. Okay, so that's basically the difference. Now, the last thing I want to mention is that there is kind of a bunch of layers that you can think of as well. So, so if I go back to relative property, and my this is probably going to be hard to see. If I do something like -50, maybe you should be able to see this a little bit better. So right now, you can see that the image is right in front of the words. It's kind of covering part of the word here. There is a property called z-index. And z-index, if I make it any negative value, so 0 is basically where it should be. It's the default. If I make any negative value, or I'm basically pushing it into the screen. If I make any positive value, I'm pulling it away from the screen. So -1 should put this, you see, behind the text. I don't know if you could really see that, but I've basically pushed this image behind the text. Okay, whereas if I left that out, it would have been before. It would have been in front of the text. Okay, so -1, -2, -3 just gives you how many steps back are we pushing this particular element. Okay, so I did cover a lot of things there very quickly, but generally, I don't want to go into too much detail about CSS. There's a lot of things that I can talk about, but CSS I find is a pretty low-level language. We do have to work with it in assignment one, but for the rest of the properties and all of this, I'll have you take a look at the slides, and basically this is going to complete our second demo. So thank you. I will see you guys next week.